because their internet just went out. So yes, so now we're recording. So if you need to take the final, we're going to spend next Thursday talking about that in class. So this is how our sequence will go. We have class today. Next Tuesday, you'll take your exam in person. Sorry, not in person, on Zoom, online. And then I'll grade the exam and get it back by next Wednesday. I've blocked all Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday just for this exam. So you'll have your grade on Wednesday. In Blackboard, I'm going to create a column that says, this is your grade if you don't take the final exam, so that there's no confusion. And then Thursday, I'm just going to jump on Zoom and talk with students that are interested in taking the final. So feel free to jump in on that conversation. But I did want to just preview that for you today so that you've got it in your mind when you're making decisions. The final exam is cumulative in the sense that it does have some questions from material on test number 1, but it's not comprehensive. It doesn't cover everything that we've done. Basically, I go back to test number 1 and pull about half the articles from that and half from test number 2, and that forms the foundation for the final. I give you that list of articles, so you're not studying everything, you're only studying the articles that I give you. The other thing that makes the final really doable is that I don't do any multiple choice on it. And so the questions are either more general or kind of that mid-level of questions, but not the specificity of multiple choice. My thought process on this is that final exams can be a stressful time. I'm a little worried about during this time of COVID, people feel more stressed than normal. And so I've just always taken this approach of making the final exam a series of short answer questions. And so I think that will work especially well this semester. So you'll take the test Tuesday, get your grades back Wednesday night, come to class Thursday online if you want to hear more about the final, and then you can take the final with either one of my classes. One class is scheduled for that next Tuesday, one for the next Thursday. So you're welcome to take it with either one, and I'll be posting all of those details. So as for this test, it's during your official class time on Tuesday. If you're a CEA student, I've initially set up the test to take place during the time slots from test number 1. So if you don't remember your time slot, you can probably just go back through your remind scroll, those texts and see, or just shoot me a text and I'll look it up. If you want to modify that as a CEA student, it would help me if you could shoot me a text by tomorrow, because it's a little hard to change that up in the online version of the test. So I just want to make sure I get it done in advance. I put on here that I'll be posting a take-home portion of the test later today. I've already posted that. It's on Blackboard. I think it's a very easy option. I'm basically giving you 3 questions and you can pick any one to answer. And one of the questions I think is easier than the other 2, but you can pick whatever interests you. And then you just turn that in anytime between now and next Wednesday. I've actually already had some students that did it last night and turned it in. So it's not overwhelming at all, but it's a way for you to get some of those test points out of the way. That question is worth 35 points. Okay, so the in-class portion then will include multiple choice and a couple short answers. I haven't finalized the test, but I'm thinking it'll be about the same number of multiple choices last time and then probably 3 short answers. But as I finish the test, I'll put those details up on Blackboard. So the main thing I want you to look at though is this page. So this test is over a lot less material. I actually didn't intend it that way. It's just where the midpoint of the semester fell. And so you had weeks 1 through 8 on the first test and 7 through 15 on this test. But because we had the retail safari and then also your project, that meant that we had some really light reading weeks. So if you look at this, you studied 58 pages of articles for the first test. You're only studying 29 pages now, so half the material. Same number of guest speaker days, fewer slide decks and fewer discussion days because we were in class less because of the retail safari. So the one thing that did increase at first glance is the videos, but let's talk about that. It's really the same amount of information. So I did create 2 2-minute videos. These are the ones from Coach Musselman and Coach Mosier. I love Razorback basketball. So I had reached out to them because they have a reputation for having a really strong focus on data analytics. And I thought we're so immersed in CPG and retail that it might be fun to pull back and look at data analytics in a totally different setting. But I'm not going to test you over that. I'm not going to say, what do they do with respect to DESI Sills? I mean, that was not my intention. So there will be no questions on the in-class test about those 2 short videos. So I wanted to clarify that that was material we covered, but it's not on the test. You can use that information, though. The reason it's on the list is you can use that information in answering the take-home test, and because one of the questions specifically ties into that. So feel free to use it there. On the Where Are They Now video, some of these are very detailed, like Amber King's specifically reviews shopper journey article, and then others are more just conversational, like Ben Rector's. So the way my goal in testing over those 5 videos is I'm trying to create questions that if you watch the videos, you're going to get the questions. And if you skipped taking advantage of that resource of information, you wouldn't be able to get them. So they're just kind of basic questions that you wouldn't have had to take copious notes from the video to answer, if that makes sense. So it's just a way to reward students that really sat down and took advantage of that resource. So do you guys have questions over the information on the test or anything at all about that before we jump into today's article? You can just come off mute if you have a question, because it's hard to do the screen and you guys and pull up the chat. So
I'm good.
Okay, I will assume everyone's good. So thank you. Okay, so this article I sent out to the advisory board and said, I want a good article that's kind of an overview of something big going on in industry for our last day of discussion. The board, 15 people, sent me 32 different articles. And this is the first time it's happened in the class the whole semester that no articles were in common. 32.
Sorry. Yeah, we have to like make.
1 second. Sorry, just had some extra noise. So 32 different articles, and I had to pick one. And I know this isn't the most exciting article, but I thought it was a good one because it showed you how when you first hear something, big news in the industry, can often be a lot of complexity behind it. And I think that's been a recurring theme in the class. You know, if you look at how much work Geometry Global did for one client, for 1 foot of space on a Walmart shelf, I think this is a consistent theme we've had, but this time it's in writing. And so this article, when I first read it as a consumer, Google plans to kill third-party cookies, my thought reading that last January was, that is great. That's less clutter for me. It's less people tracking me. And then in the next few days, as I started thinking about what that really means, I think it actually means more clutter and more tracking and more emails, and it's just ramping everything up. And so I thought it would be kind of a good article to jump into to uncover that complexity. Before we do it, I want to share just a couple slides with you just to make sure we're all understanding the same wording. So the first thing, DigiDay is a online free resource that I love. We just didn't happen to use it much this semester. This is their cool graphic. But they immediately came out with an article that said, you know, everyone is singing Google's praises, you know, thanking Google for stopping third-party cookies. But really, Google always wins. All that happened with this move that Google announced is that more people are going to buy, more brands, more companies are going to buy their first party data. So this is actually an increase in a revenue stream for them, where before, whoever placed ads on Google sites, they were getting the revenue stream. It really just shifts the revenue stream to Google. So this is not a sacrifice that they made on the behalf of the consumer. This is really just a revenue stream. So I like that Digiday just immediately called them out. So how this will work is that let's assume that Abby is on the Google site, and in the past, an advertiser on that site could collect her analytics. So that is what is Google's putting a stop to, is all that third-party cookie data collection. Now Google will collect the analytics, and for a fee, they will place targeted ads, but without giving the company that they're working for direct access to Abby's information. They will hold all the cards, really, all the information. But for a fee, a fairly high fee, they'll place the ads for the company. So really it gives Google all the control and the revenue in that example. A couple just basic definitions. I think, sure, as seniors, you're familiar with all these, but these I like because they're just very straightforward definitions. As a reminder of what's a first-party cookie, anything created by the host domain, and what's a third-party cookie, anything created by ones who are tracking steps on that domain. They left out second-party cookies because it's really the least complicated. It's just when the first-party cookie allows another company to use their information. So if Walmart takes some of their in-house data, whether it's Retail Link or something else, and they share that with General Mills, that becomes second party use to General Mills. They weren't the first party collector of it, but they're second party user, not actually collecting it themselves. And then the other definition I threw up, this is definitely goes back to intro of marketing for you all, but it's just a reminder of the peso model, which was looking at the distinction between paid, earned, shared, and owned. And I just wanted to throw this up because this article talked specifically about these four, and I know it's been a while since you've seen the definitions of them. So let's go back. I'd love to get your takeaways first, and just do it by speaking instead of the chat, and then I'll cover a few extra things that I have in case you don't hit on them. But just anyone, we have such a small group, anyone at all can jump in.
I think I have more of a question just to make sure I'm clear on the whole concept.
It's a little confusing, so ask away. Hopefully I have an answer.
No, you probably will. Because this is actually the first time that I've even seen that this was happening. So for example, if I were to go on Google searching a TV stand, does that mean that it won't pop up on the very top, like ad by Wayfair or ad by Ashley Furniture or whatever? Or even when I'm scrolling through Instagram, how does that affect?
Okay, so it's a great question, Abby. So first, none of this will happen till 2022. So it's not going to happen right away. Second, in theory, those ads will still be there because the companies still want you to see their information first. However, the companies won't be able to collect your click-through data.
Okay.
They can only collect it if you click through and you're then on their website. They can do whatever they want at that point because you're back to first-party data collection. But right now, as it stands, they were able to tell if you clicked through what you looked at on the web page in general, how long you stayed on different things on the initial Google site. They can't track any of that once this step takes place.
Okay.
They can only track you when you get to their site. It's pretty confusing. Now, some people have said that we're not going to see as many ads up there because it's not going to be as beneficial for companies to do that. I don't believe that. I think we're still going to see ads because they know that consumers are searching for these things and they still need to provide a way for you to click through there.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think you'll still see it up there, that it's just not a trackable function anymore.
So do you think it'll stay personalized?
Yeah, I do think it will, because, these companies have invested in all these resources for micro targeting. What I think is going to happen, is totally my opinion, is let's look at the concept in this article of walled gardens. I love the way they said that. The man in the article coined that term. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see all of these walled gardens pop up. So if Colgate can't track you until you hit Colgate's page, they're going to have to make their page so exciting that it's worth you to click through and stay on it and do something on the page rather than the initial view, so that they can track your presence. Mm-hmm. So all of these companies are going to have to create things that when you click through, it's really enticing. And they're calling these walled gardens because Colgate has to create their own, Crest creates their own, Pepsi has their own. These companies have their own pages now, but they're just not investing in the software to track you once you're there, or they're not investing to make the pages shoppable and really interactive. I bet each of you have clicked through to something and then you get to the page it takes you to and you have no interest. It's dull, it's not shoppable, it's not giving you the information you want. Well, all these companies are going to have to ramp up those pages in order to get you to stay. So I think this idea of walled gardens that they mention is going to proliferate, and I think we're going to have massive clutter. I don't personally want to see an Instagram account for everything that's in my basket. I just don't, Now, granted, I follow Snickers, and you're each going to follow your things that you love, but I'm not going to follow Highland Dairy and Colgate toothpaste and the minutia of what I buy in a shopping trip. I'm not going to follow the Jolly Green Giant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big challenge because, okay, so like right now, you can't see, I'm not in pajamas, but I'm wearing these joggers made by Bella Doll. Bella Doll, as a clothing brand, already has their own social media accounts, and I might follow those, and they're shoppable, so I might buy directly from them, but I'm not doing the same for toothpaste and green beans. And I don't really envision a time that consumers will.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see just an onset of clutter. And I also think an unintended consequence of this is it's going to squeeze the profit margin of these brands and companies, because if Colgate's having to ramp up how they collect data by having their own shoppable landing pages, they're going to have to spend a lot of money and drop their price a lot in order for me to buy my tube of Colgate toothpaste on their page. I'm just not seeing it. And it's going to squeeze their profit margins because they're going to have to spend money. And now their ad buys are more expensive. And I think they're going to pass that cost on to us. So in the end, yes, I have less clutter because they're killing third-party cookies, and I have less tracking, but I think we're going to see more clutter, and the cost is going to be passed on to the consumer. So that's just my.
It sounds like a good time for us to be marketing majors, which is good.
Yes, exactly. It's going to create a whole proliferation, and you can bet, Abby, I'm glad you said that. You can bet the people they're going to turn to are people in your age group, because this is increasing the importance of social media and influencers. And Amanda Rosen, that was one of the first things she said in her video is she has people she reports to that have never heard of TikTok. You're the experts on it. And so I think it's going to help in that case a lot. Does anyone have another takeaway from the article?
I was just going to say something. So since the third-party cookies is getting taken away, does that mean that like the other social media accounts we use aren't going to be directly linked to Google anymore, so it won't be seeing as many ads, or is Google still gonna like implicate that into other social medias?
I think that we're still going to see it, especially in the short term, because take a P&G, they can't let go of their current marketing approach until they have something to replace it. They're
Yeah.
working on that now.
Okay.
P&G is probably best positioned, in my opinion, of all the CPG because they already have, I mean, like the Swiffer Mop has a social media account and a strong following. Mr. Clean, okay, I think Mr. Clean is completely creepy. I do not understand him at all. Mr. Clean has a huge following of single women who are 50 to 65 years of age. They follow that account. They treat him like a person. He sold a pin, like he's a person. Procter & Gamble sold a pinup calendar 2 years ago at Mr. Clean, and it sold out at Barnes & Noble before any other calendar did. 50 to 65-year-old, your mom, that is your mom, sitting there buying a Mr. Clean calendar showing him lounging in boxer shorts in front of the Christmas tree. He was wearing a red, I can't remember, some kind of red outfit on Valentine's Day holding a bouquet of flowers in the calendar, and it just flew off the shelf. You know, no one in your age group, but so Procter & Gamble's been doing this well for a long time, but all these smaller companies have not.
So I guess already having that strong social media following is really important since this is all getting taken away.
I think it is important, and I think they've also got to find a way to make it shoppable in the interim. Or they're going to have to be willing to pay that increased price that Google has for placing. Google will offer to place their ad. They're calling it a privacy sandbox, where they're saying, we'll place your ad so that Abby sees the ad. Abby's mom sees the ad for Mr. Clean, but we're going to place that ad for you rather than you having the controls to place it yourself. And of course, they'll have an upcharge for it. That's what I think. I mean, it's all theoretical now because nothing's happened. Third party gathering is still in place till 2022. So interesting, I think. Let me see if I have anything else there.
Molly, I agree with you. Like, I don't think I'll even see like a world without ads in cookies like throughout my lifetime. Because these big companies have to have a customer base and have to make their money somehow. But
Yes.
do you think they're becoming more aware of? Because this article kind of reminds me of the Netflix documentary we watched, The Social Dilemma. Do you think they're becoming more aware of the negative aspects of social media and stuff like that?
I think everyone is fully aware of it, but I just don't. I guess I'm just not an optimist on this. I don't see anything really changing. I mean, there's not going to be a mass migration of parents that quit letting their kids have screens at an early age. I don't think. And so I think any minor changes that take place are really going to be just on the periphery in the households that really clamp down on it. But I think, you know, we look at school systems like the Boston public school system just, I think it was 2 years ago, they went iPad for everything. There's no paper and pencil in the classroom. Their kindergartners don't learn to draw with their hands. They're not turning in assignments where they're making their letters on paper. It's all on an iPad. And they're issued an iPad in the Boston public school system at kindergarten, and they carry that same iPad through fourth grade, and then they get a new one when they go to fifth grade to carry them through middle school. So I think when we have that kind of a structure popping up in cities, I think we're all just traveling down that path. I'm glad I've raised my kids for the most part. Maybe there'll be some kind of pushback pendulum, but I don't know. Okay, cheerful subjects. Let's go on to something else. So I'm going to go through some of the things that we covered that we weren't specifically talking about in class because we were either doing the retail safari or you were off that week to write up the retail safari. There are exceptions to this, like Amber King's we discussed thoroughly in class because it was before the store walk. But I want to tell you a story about why we have 5 instead of 6. So Dylan Breeding is an omni-channel buyer for Walmart, books, magazines, music. We filmed that. But as it turns out, he was using a work computer, a Walmart issued computer, when he filmed it. And so he had to go through an approval process of getting that permission to have it released because he was using a work computer on his side of the interview on Zoom. And it took 3 weeks of making this request. And in the end, Walmart said that they did not want an interview with a buyer to be in the public domain, even though I said I would just limit it to Blackboard, and they just said no. So it was interesting for me that we had 3 weeks of requesting. And I think it speaks to how competitive things are, and that companies are having to really protect every bit of intellectual property that they have. And so that's why we don't have Dylan's video. Next time I do it, he will use a personal computer, and we'll tape it outside of that, which is what we've done in the past. Okay, so you only have to study 5. I guess that's the good part, although Dylan's interview was interesting, I thought. So you'll review 5 of them. There are summaries of these on LinkedIn, both on my account and on the accounts of other students that you could look up if you want to look at it. But again, if you watch the video, you're going to be fine with the questions. Just to recap each of these, how I came up with picking these, because clearly I've had tens of thousands of students over 30 years, is I read the essays that everyone wrote during COVID for test number 2. And I picked out the key themes that seemed to be troubling people and tried to think of past students I've had that could address that. Now, the exception to this is Amber King, because I knew that with Amber being a current director at Mars, that she could speak specifically to the shopper's journey. So she's kind of separate of this, but the others were handpicked to really address a fear or a challenge or a stress point that I saw in those essays. So for example, the number one stress point that those essays mentioned was a fear of getting a job, or if you have a job, what that's going to look like. How are things changing? Because there's just so much change. And I thought no one better to speak to that than Luke Holland, who, as he said in his video, was literally standing on Wall Street, getting ready to walk in to interview with Lehman Brothers. And he called me and he said, I'm hearing that Lehman Brothers just declared bankruptcy. And I said, it's coming across my feed too. And he just saw 4 years of hard work wash away. Everything on Wall Street shut down. And he ended up not getting to work where he'd always planned. And so I love his story of starting in a mailroom at $28,000 a year when he thought he'd be making 6 figures on Wall Street. But then look how happy he is now. I mean, he is like living the dream, the youngest chief of staff on Capitol Hill, and just quickly redirected and found a new way to do things. I also really loved the story he told about trust and the lobbyist that came to him and was honest about why Luke shouldn't sign what he was asking him to sign. And I thought that was a good story. Ben Rector, I handpicked because some of you will go into jobs and you're going to feel ill-prepared on day one. You know, they have this phenomenon of imposter syndrome, or maybe you just don't feel like you have the solid background to do what they're asking you to do. And I think Ben Rector was such a good example of somebody. He learned nothing at all in my class that prepared him for what he's doing. I mean, I can't lay claim to any of Ben's success, but he's made his way because he just had a great enthusiasm for learning. And I picked Richard because he knew he wanted to start Fayetteville K-Life, that he knew he wanted that as his first job, but he knew he didn't want to do it forever. And so he's a great example of somebody that didn't just switch jobs, he switched to 4 different industries in his 16 years. And then we finally had Hunter Poole. I loved Hunter's discussion of why he chose the jobs he chose. It wasn't what Amber chose. She loved shopper marketing and stayed solidly in that lane. What Hunter cared about was that he was living in a big city. He took a job in Chicago, not because he cared about the company, but because it got him to a big city. He lived there and he wanted a bigger city. He took the job in New York simply because it got him to New York. So I think it's a good reminder to think about what you're passionate about. In fact, that's one of the questions you can answer on the take home is, what are you passionate about? And, what can get you there? And I think Hunter was passionate about working for a company that didn't have a vacation policy and living in a big city. That's what drove his decisions. Hunter this week switched jobs, and he is now working for Acorn, which is a influence company that has an office here in Northwest Arkansas, and he's going to remote for them from New York, and he's super excited about that. Okay, probably my one big disappointment of the semester, other than how chaotic week 10 ended up being, was I hated that we did not meet in class during Singles Day. It was November 11th, so that was the day that the wine group took their store walk, and we didn't meet that week. But I love Singles Day, and you all may be different than my other students, but so far I've only had 2 students that had heard of Singles Day before we talked about it in class. So I don't know if you guys are the same, but I love Singles Day. So Singles Day actually started out as something called Bare Branches Day. So if you picture, November is the 11th month, so 2 single numbers, and it's the 11th day, so 2 more. So you have 4 single lines, vertical lines. And in China, they called that the Mandarin term for bare branches. So their thought is, if Samantha is unmarried, and Samantha, I have no idea on your personal situation, but let's say Samantha's not dating somebody, she is a bare branch. That's the term in China that they use in China to indicate her tree is not full. It's not connected to other things. So picture these bare branches. They picked November 11th. Honestly, as the cynic of Valentine's Day, I think it's just another commercial opportunistic move to get people to spend money. But look at the success. So Black Friday, $7.4 billion last year. Just one company in Singles Day booked $38 billion of revenue. I mean, it's just, you can't even compare the two. And we hold up in the States Black Friday and Cyber Monday as these great success stories. So I love that. If we look at the numbers from this year, I didn't have them the day that we did this discussion of Singles Day, but here are the numbers. $74 billion booked this year with Alibaba, 40 billion, so 114 billion between those 2 companies. It's just insanity. So one thing that was interesting is there are a lot of pre-surveys trying to figure out what people are going to buy. And one of the surveys said, how do you feel about American products compared to Chinese? Now, everyone on this call knows what your financial credit score is. If Abby quit paying her utility bill, after a couple months, the utility bill is going to report it to the credit agency, and her credit score will drop. And when she goes to buy her first house, she's going to have to pay a higher interest rate than she would if she paid her utilities on time. So in China, and my summer class that I teach is all on life and business in China. I love it. But in China, they have a social credit score. You may have read about this. And how about thumbs up? Is there anyone that's read about the social credit score? Okay, Madison, there we go. So the social credit score measures whether you're a good citizen of China, whether you put China before other things, whether you put the collective over the single. And so they measure things like if Madison is jaywalking and the closed circuit TVs pick it up, it actually gets fed into her social credit score and she gets a knock on it. They use that in the same way that they use our financial credit score. So if Madison went to get a loan, she's got to pay a higher rate if she's violated the law, even in minor ways. I think the most interesting component of the credit score in China is that if you use a public bathroom more than one time in 90 minutes, it's a hit against your social credit score. So they actually have cameras set up, they do facial scan recognition, and they have mechanized machines in the tier 1 cities. So if Ashley goes in to the subway system to use the bathroom a second time in a 90-minute span of time, the system locks the toilet paper so she can't get it. And it hits her social credit score. It's really fascinating to think about. I bring it up because another part of the algorithm of the social credit score is if you publicly express some affinity for something else outside of China over a Chinese product. So these surveys are showing 66% of Chinese consumers say they'll be shopping for domestic brands. 57% say they're not going to spend as much on American products as they did last year. And a lot of that was coming because this social credit score is becoming more prominent. So I'm going to switch the screen that I'm sharing and show you a quick, I think it's like a 2-minute video. Sorry, it takes me a second to get this up. Okay, so hopefully the sound will work on this, but listen for when he talks about, we know what consumers said, they're not buying American products, but then he talks about how American products were the top sellers.
And asked him about the strategy on lower tier cities. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
China is huge geographically. What happens to consumers from...
Sorry, I was trying to get you from not having to see the ads, and I think I put it back too far. Here we go.
Across its platforms totaled 498.2 billion yuan, or just over 74 billion US dollars. JD saying its total transaction volume was 271.5 billion yuan, just over $40 billion. What's interesting?
Okay, so I'm going to tell you, this is so crazy to me. I mean, it just totally puts our commercialization of the Super Bowl to shame. So they set up 50 of these big screens. This big screen is as big as a movie theater screen. Now, the one that we're seeing in this shot, you can see that there are reporters all sitting at desks looking at the screen. But in the other 49 locations, they actually have musicians performing. So their equivalent of a Taylor Swift would come up in the middle of this, in the middle of the pandemic, and do a show, sing some songs. They bring influencers on, athletes. It's a big entertainment phenomenon, and people crowd in to see it. But the whole time, this screen is running in the back, almost like a telethon. They don't even do telethons anymore, do they? But it's just showing the dollars that are racking up. And it's just this big commercial phenomenon. And what those numbers on the right are saying are the exact orders, the number of locations they're going to, and then it's showing you at this point, they've hit $74 billion in sales. So let's go on with the video.
Here, of course, is the fact that this wasn't just a single day for Singles Day this year. It was a longer period. Promotion started on November 1st. So that's why we're seeing that sort of rise in numbers as well. That really helps as well. But let me just dig in to a couple of the key themes here. Imported products. That was number one here, really, because a lot of Chinese travelers who would have been going abroad on holiday, buying those foreign products that they were like, weren't able to do so because of the pandemic, and turned to these e-commerce platforms to buy some of these products. And the demand was quite high there, as expected by Alibaba. And interestingly, it was American brands that were really the top, actually, in terms of the amount of sales of foreign brands being bought. That's according to Michael Evan, who's the president of Alibaba. Here's what he had to say.
Each year, no matter whether it's tariffs, it doesn't matter who the president is, that number increases. And the reason it does is because Chinese consumers want to buy great American brands.
Now, it's not just about driving sales Singles Day, it's also about marketing. And for these companies, Alibaba and JD, it's about trying to acquire some new customers. And so where they're looking right now is some of these lower tier, smaller cities in China that are perhaps have less spending power. And so these promotional activities are very key to their push into that. Now, JD has been making a strong push for these lower tier cities. And I had a chance to catch up with Shu Lei, the CEO of JD Retail, and asked him about the strategy on lower tier cities. Let's listen in to what he had to say.
China is huge geographically. What happens to consumers from fourth to sixth tier cities when they want to buy some big branded products? They either find out that the products are not available locally or they are sold at a much higher price than those in the upper tier cities. So JD is providing consumers in lower tiered markets the same kind of access to products and pricing through our nationwide logistics network.
Okay, so the JD, which was the second ranking company having sales, they actually rented just for Singles Day, which when they showed Michael Evans, he's clearly, an English speaking CEO of that company. They hired him because they wanted to change the format from Singles Day to this 11-day extravaganza. And that's why they hired somebody who had experience with Black Friday and Cyber Monday. Anyway, JD said, we want to figure out how to get products to these fourth to sixth tier cities. They actually rented for 11 days 700 of the largest planes in the world, big, massive military cargo planes, to do nothing but deliver products to the outer reaches of China. So it's not just this extravaganza of musicians. Katy Perry performed there last year. And I don't think any American musicians performed this year because of COVID, but it's this huge extravaganza, all supposed to celebrate being single and just this massive commercialization. But picture 700 cargo planes just flying over for 11 days, doing nothing except delivering products. So let's go back to our slide deck and get on track. So I just love the whole discussion of Singles Day. I think it's such an amazing phenomenon. Okay, so we have the discrepancy between what they said they were going to buy and then what he told us they ended up buying. Turns out, because that's a little confusing, if consumers in China are worried about being traced for answering a survey, how do they have the nerve to actually buy the American product? But it turns out there's a whole secondary market where they could place their order with another broker who assured them anonymity, and then that broker bought the products, almost like having a VPN outside of China. They bought the products as if they were a non-Chinese individual and then resold them to the person placing the order. It's all crazy. Okay, so then less controversial, we have this article, and the whole point of this article, it's very straightforward, but it was really emphasizing that Walmart's moved to this omni-channel approach, and we saw that in the store walks, that every buyer that we met with in those store walks has moved from being an in-store buyer to an omni-channel buyer. So this was just a straightforward article that kind of talked about that whole move of Walmart to the omni-channel. You may have seen the news this week that Walmart restructured 1,200 people as part of this whole omni-channel move. Okay, so I loved this week. We did not get to meet in person because y'all were working on your projects, but I love the role of data in companies. And the backstory on this is that I loved the article that we're reading, but we're also so CPG retail centric that I wanted to make sure we had a good feeling for how data is used in other industries. I don't know Coach Musselman and Coach Mosier. I've never met them, but just one day at noon, my son was talking about how much they use data. And I said, you know what, I'm going to email and see if they'll make me a video. I sent the email at noon and they sent me the videos before 1 o'clock, both of them, same day. And they were so nice. And Coach Musselman said, I'm so starved for student attention. I just, am not thriving in this environment. So I just loved that they jumped right in. Again, it's not testable material, but I think it's interesting, especially if you're a Razorback fan. But for the article itself, Um, I think it was just a good overview of how different companies are using data, and I really liked P&G's approach. So if you think about Jeff Metzner saying that he had insights, ideas, and execution, Curdy is talking about how they successfully do that at P&G. So the fact that they don't let themselves get caught up in the tools they're using, they focus on what is the key consumer question that they're answering. And only after the whole group has decided on that key question do they then look at what tool they're going to use. Because they think, and I think this is true too, that we get so caught up in tools that we forget what it is we're really looking at. I also, if I had to pick a job I would not want to have right now, it would be head of customer engagement for Uber during the pandemic. That sounds like insanity to me, but I really like how she said, our superpower with data is taking all the complexity of the different data points and distilling it down to a universal human truth. And the human truth for Uber is that it's not just about getting Emily from point A to point B, but it's about delivering food to Emily, delivering Emily to other people, delivering other people to where Emily's going. So it's that delivery in a safe environment that is at their core. So that, as a reminder, I put up both the super long version and the subset. I think the subset's like 5 pages long, and the long version's like 40, but we're only covering the short version. Okay, is that it? 2-minute videos were on there. Okay, I think that's it for a roundup of the articles. Do y'all have any questions on that before I wrap things up? Okay, has anyone gone through the boredom of watching my 7-minute Thanksgiving video? Well, I'm gonna recap one part of it, which is I was in a really boring meeting the week before Thanksgiving. It wasn't with a student, it was with colleagues. And I was daydreaming in it, not paying attention. I started thinking about, I think my favorite thing of the class is that it is a touch point between my current students and my past students. And that's not something I expected when I started my job 30 years ago. I thought the semester ends and I'm done and I move on. And so this whole idea of having 30 years of students is something I don't take for granted. So in this meeting, I just started writing down the different students that were involved in your class. So this is what that video has. 321 that did the initial survey for the class, 15 that every single week send me articles as advisory board members. I hope some of you will do that in the future. 7 that made 2 different videos at the first about what it is you're going to see in the class. If you recall, they talked about each of the different pieces. 5 students that cut a video for me on what marketing majors and minors can do with their degree. 7 different guest speakers. Andy Murray, who kind of became obsessed with the class and started cutting videos for us. I mean, that's crazy. 6 people that invested time in these 15-minute Where Are They Nows. 16 store walk execs. I only knew 3 of those executives going into it. Those are strangers to me too. And then the 2 coaches that were willing to do it. So I added up all these numbers, again, when I probably should have been paying attention in the meeting, and 380 people. I mean, it's just insane to me. That's the first time I've ever really added it up and thought about it. But as I said in the video, that's what I want your takeaway to be, because a year from now, these articles we've talked about will be in the past. We'll be into new social media platforms, new issues. We'll be out of the pandemic. I mean, honestly, the things we've spent time covering will be by the wayside, but this is what I want you to take with you. The fact that you were in a class that 380 strangers chose to take time to impact your academic journey. And I think that's the most powerful lesson we can have. I know I'm grateful for it, and I don't mean this to sound cliche, but I hope that you will join that group of people and do the same for my coming students, whether it's as soon as spring semester or just down the road. I love hearing from students that send me articles, and as you send me more, I'll begin unfortunately, to ask you to do more, to cut videos, to be a guest speaker, to, maybe be on the advisory board at some point. But this is my favorite part of the class. And I hope that this is what you remember and what you feel encouraged by. And that in this time of the pandemic, you don't feel as isolated, at least for this Tuesday, Thursday moment in time. So I hate that we're doing this virtually, and that's such a weird thing for me to have this be the last day. And some of you are graduating. Could be your last day of class period, which is even stranger. But I appreciate each of you and appreciate your patience during all of this. I'm hearing a rumor that next semester we get to actually have students in the office visiting me. I'm in 312. Please come see me. I always have Snickers there for you to eat. But that's all I have. I can cut you loose 20 minutes early, or I can stay on and answer any questions anyone individually has. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Molly, and thank you for everything. I've really enjoyed your class. And
thanks, Abby. I really appreciate it. I had such sadness at the beginning of the semester when I realized this is the reality of things. And I definitely have some regrets. I regret week 10. And I regret that at 57, I cannot juggle the hybrid thing of having students in front of me and live students there. And I really wish, I cannot tell you all how hard I practiced, and it was just a failure. And so that's why we didn't do synchronous, it was awful. So I hate that for some of you, you've just had to live in this recorded world for much of it. But it's part of why I didn't want to do it today and just wanted to separate out my in-class and my virtual. But I appreciate your all's patience.
No, I think this was by far the best class I had hybrid wise. And like you adapting and you being able to kind of manage all of the in-person virtual. So no, it's been really good. And I don't think I got any less from the class just because of the
format.
Format. Yes, that's the word.
I appreciate it because I've definitely learned I'm not a virtual person. And I know there are studies. MTV just did a big study that talked about how for 13 to 18-year-olds, they see absolutely no difference between a virtual friend and a real friend. And I'm just clearly not in that age group at 57. And to me, this just seems uncomfortable. But y'all were super patient, I will say. I was going to switch and just do remote only next semester, but my youngest son is going to be in my class and then he graduates. And so I just want to be able to have some face-to-face component. So I'm going to do in class in the spring. Let's see. So I'll be around. So come see me.
Thank you so much, Molly. I've loved having you this semester.
Thank you. I take the words to heart more than you would guess. I really appreciate it. And
yeah, and like Gail said, this is probably the most valuable class I've had this semester. How you brought in other people from the past, like I learned more in this class than I have in any other ones in the past.
Wow.
So I'd say.
You. I really,
thank you.
You're welcome.
It's been just so great, and I feel like even for being like virtual, this is probably the most hands-on class I've had, which has been nice and kind of a surprise. So thank you for making that happen.
I really love, it's been my biggest surprise and blessing of my job is this idea of community with my students, and to have students that will reach out to me when they have job openings. Some, don't tell the Career Center, but some don't even go through the Career Center. They'll just shoot me, or John Cole has kind of the same relationship with his past students. And I love that feeling that if you end up, let's say Samantha, at some point you end up in Cincinnati, I love that you can text me and I can look on LinkedIn and find students who are there. So definitely make sure and take advantage of that in the future. That LinkedIn is genius. Okay, I'm going to cut you all loose. I'm going to get out of my daughter's room, which I should have turned the heat on before I started this morning. Didn't realize we didn't have it going because she's not living at home. It's a little chilly. So have a great day, but text me if you have any questions coming into the test. Okay. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'll be the last to jump off.